1/10 of a kilometre per hour. That is the entire margin between Lewis Hamilton finishing 4th in Hungary and Lewis Hamilton finishing 5th. Not a tenth of a second, a tenth of a kilometre per hour, measured in a pit lane he has driven for 19 seasons. The stewards log it at 17:16 in the afternoon, document 57, 5 seconds added to his race time. And when his engineer reads it out over the radio at the Hungaroring, Hamilton does not argue the number, he argues the pattern, because this is the 4th time the stewards have punished him in 3 race weekends. 24 hours earlier, in the same paddock, a 19-year-old leading the World Championship collects 3 separate punishments out of 2 separate investigations. A grid drop, a license point, and a formal warning. Same weekend. Same stewards. 2 drivers separated by 50 points in the standings, both of them caught by a sport that now measures everything all the time, to a resolution no human being sitting in the car can actually feel. Lap 56 of 70. Oscar Piastri's McLaren slows on the approach to turn 4 with a gearbox failure and stops at the side of the circuit, and the virtual safety car boards light up around the Hungaroring. Ferrari make the call late. Hamilton is already committed to the pit lane entry when it arrives, and he says afterwards that there was no time to debate it, that his tyres were fine, that in hindsight, he would not have stopped at all. 3rd stop of the afternoon. The car comes in, the crew go over the wall, and the whole thing takes a handful of seconds. Then he presses the button. Every Formula 1 car carries a pit lane speed limiter. The driver arms it before the white line, and the engine management does the rest, holding the car at whatever number the race director has set for that circuit. At the Hungaroring, that number is 80 kilometers per hour. It is not a suggestion, and there is no tolerance written into it. The regulation exists because a wheel came off a car in the Monaco pit lane in 1994 and injured the mechanic standing in it, and the sport decided that day that speed in a working pit lane is not a competitive question. Hamilton releases the limiter a fraction early on the way out. That is Ferrari's own account of it, given by Fred Vasseur after the race, that the limiter came off too soon and that the team made too many mistakes across the afternoon. The car accelerates, the timing system takes its reading, and somewhere in the FIA software a number appears that is 1/10 of a kilometre per hour higher than it is allowed to be. 5 seconds. Document 57. No license points, no reprimand, nothing on his record beyond the time itself. On the radio, his race engineer Carlo Santi reads it out flatly. 5 seconds for speeding into the pit lane. And Hamilton's answer comes back sharp, that they are handing out penalties like crazy. He is not disputing the reading, he is disputing the frequency, and the frequency is the part worth sitting with. Here is what the timing system is actually doing when it produces that number. It is not pointing a radar gun at the car. There are loops buried in the track surface at fixed points along the pit lane, and the car's transponder trips each one as it passes. The system knows the time between 2 loops, and it knows the distance between them. And from those 2 figures, it calculates an average speed across the segment. The stewards receive that number and nothing else, which means the reading depends on 2 things being exactly right. The timing, which is measured to thousandths of a second and is effectively beyond argument, and the distance, which is a physical measurement of a piece of tarmac, surveyed before the event and then trusted for the rest of the weekend. What that same tenth costs you depends entirely on when you commit it. In a practice session or in qualifying, exceeding the pit lane limit is a financial matter, and the driver is not sanctioned at all. The team pays €100 for every kilometre per hour over the line, capped at 1,000. Hamilton has been on the wrong end of that version before. At Las Vegas last season, the timing loops caught him a tenth over in the 3rd practice session, and Ferrari paid €100, which is roughly what a set of tyre blankets costs to ship, and nobody wrote a word about it. In the race, the same tenth is worth 5 seconds of your afternoon. Same driver, same offence, same margin, and the difference between a rounding error on an invoice and a lost position is nothing more than which session the clock happens to be running in. Stewards can escalate it further if they believe a driver was speeding to gain something, and they have, converting bigger breaches into drive-through penalties and 20-second additions. Hungary is not that. Hungary is the smallest possible version of the offence, applied at the most expensive possible moment, 16 meters. That is how much earlier Kimi Antonelli lifts off the throttle on Saturday afternoon, and it is the detail that tells you how finely this sport is now being read. Max Verstappen spins at the final corner in the closing minutes of the 3rd qualifying session. The yellow flags come out, Antonelli is on a lap behind him, and what he does next gets pulled apart by the stewards afterwards, in a level of detail that would have been impossible to produce 15 years ago. He lifts 16 meters earlier than his previous lap. He enters the affected sector 14 kilometers per hour slower. Both of those things are true, and both of them are in his favor. And then the telemetry turns on him. Passing the actual incident site, the point where a car is stationary and marshals may be exposed, he is 3 kilometers per hour faster than he was the lap before. Across the mini sector as a whole, his speed reduction comes out at less than 1%. The stewards call it insufficient and unsustained. The guideline penalty for that offence is a 5-place grid drop. They reduce it to 3, citing mitigation, and attach 1 point to his super licence. Document 41. That would be a bad afternoon on its own. The afternoon is not finished with him, because while the first investigation is still running, a second one opens on the same car for something that happened on the same lap sequence. On his in-lap, returning to the pit lane, Antonelli's time between the second safety car line and the first exceeds the maximum delta the race director set for the event, driving unnecessarily slowly. It is the mirror image of the first offence, a driver being punished for going too slow minutes after being punished for going too fast, and the two files sit next to each other in the same steward's room on the same evening. He escapes that one with a formal warning. Document 43. The stewards note that no other car was overtaken by him while he was doing it, and the mitigation reportedly includes the fact that his own garage was distracted at that moment by a problem on George Russell's car, which is a genuinely strange sentence to write about a championship leader. So the ledger: 1 grid drop, 3 places, 1 licence point, 1 formal warning, 2 investigations, 1 Saturday. That licence point matters more than the grid drop does, and it is the thing that will still be sitting there in November. Super licence points run on a rolling 12-month window. Accumulate 12 of them inside that window, and the suspension is automatic. A full race missed, no discretion, no appeal on the arithmetic. It has only ever happened once under the current system, when Kevin Magnussen reached 12 in 2024 and sat out Baku while Oliver Bearman drove his car. Antonelli leaves Hungary on 4. He is 19 years old. He has never led a championship into a summer break before, and he is a third of the way to a mandatory holiday he cannot take. He is also being squeezed from a direction that has nothing to do with the stewards. After Monaco, his championship lead stood at 66 points and looked close to unassailable. Then the Mercedes started braking underneath him. An electrical failure in Barcelona, a brake problem in Austria, a wheel shield and brake duct failure at Silverstone. 3 retirements or compromised afternoons that had nothing to do with anything he did with his hands. And the lead came down to 50 before he had made a serious mistake of his own. Toto Wolff has been careful in how he talks about him through all of it. He praises the job the kid is doing, then points out that Formula One rewards consistency rather than isolated brilliance. He has also admitted that the speed of the rise is the thing that worries him, because a first genuinely costly error is still out there somewhere, and nobody knows what it lands on. Saturday, at the Hungaroring, is the closest he has come to finding out. Pull back from the two of them for a second, because neither driver is really the subject here. The system is, 6 weeks before Hungary, the same enforcement mechanism produces something the sport genuinely could not explain. Monaco, the 7th of June, 5 drivers get 5-second penalties in a single afternoon for exceeding the pit lane speed limit. Pierre Gasly, Lewis Hamilton, Oscar Piastri, Franco Colapinto, George Russell. 5 cars from 4 different teams, all of them caught inside the same narrow band, on a circuit where the limit is 60 km per hour rather than 80. Hamilton's margin at Monaco is 1/10 of a kilometre per hour. The same 10th he gets in Hungary, against a lower number. Gasly gets caught twice on the same afternoon, the second time by 4/10, which is the detail that should have made somebody suspicious immediately. One driver having a bad day with a button is a driver error. 5 drivers from 4 teams clustered inside half a kilometre per hour of the same threshold is a distribution. And distributions have causes. His reaction in the harbour that evening is worth remembering, because it is not the reaction of a man making an excuse. He says he was not speeding. He says he has driven that pit lane for years, that it is not as if he came in and forgot to press the button, and that he was shocked to be told he was over because he was not over. Carlos Sainz says the Drivers' Association will be convening about it. Russell blames a software problem. Martin Brundle wonders on air whether a sensor has gone wrong. The FIA looks at its own data and concludes the measurement is sound, and that the drivers are cutting the pit entry line and shortening their own path. Enter Alpine. Not the drivers, not the association, not another radio complaint. Mechanics, on foot, with a trundle wheel, measuring the Monaco pit lane by hand. What follows is one of the more remarkable technical reversals in recent Formula One governance. Alpine take it to a right of review, and the pit lane gets scanned properly with LiDAR. The shortest available distance between the 2 relevant timing loops turns out to be 77 centimeters shorter than the distance the system was using to do its arithmetic. 77 centimeters, on loops that are surveyed by satellite and are supposed to be accurate to about a centimeter. Shorter distance, same elapsed time, higher calculated speed. The number was inflated by a piece of tarmac being fractionally shorter than the map said it was. Gasly's 2 penalties are rescinded on the 12th of June, and his 3rd place is handed back. McLaren lodge an appeal with the International Court of Appeal 4 days later. Mercedes file a petition, and then withdraw it 2 days after that. Hamilton's Monaco penalty is never reviewed. Ferrari do not petition, no scan is run on his behalf, and the 5 seconds stay on his record. He finishes second in Monaco anyway, so the sporting cost is nothing. The precedent is the thing that survives, which brings the Hungarian document into an awkward light rather than a clean one. Nobody has produced any evidence that the Hungaroring loops are wrong. Ferrari have not asked for a scan, Hamilton has not claimed the reading is false, and his own team have said openly that the limiter came off early. On the facts as they stand, the penalty is correct. It is just that the sport spent June discovering that correct and accurate are not automatically the same word. 4th on the road, 5th in the classification. That is the arithmetic of 5 seconds at a circuit where nobody overtakes. Hamilton crosses the line in 4th place and drops behind Charles Leclerc by 0.7 of a second once the penalty is applied, which means the 1/10 of a kilometre per hour in the pit lane costs him a position to his own teammate in the same car. Lando Norris wins it. Verstappen is second, 15 seconds back. And in third, 18.7 seconds behind the winner, is Kimi Antonelli, starting 7th after the grid drop. Recovering to the podium anyway, the other Mercedes spends the afternoon proving how hard that recovery actually was. George Russell goes into anti-stall at the start, drops to around 19th on the opening lap, and spends 70 laps clawing his way back to 7th at a circuit where the overtaking numbers are famously close to 0. Piastri, who was in the fight for the win, does not finish at all. The gearbox that ends his race is the same failure that brings out the virtual safety car, which is the same virtual safety car that puts Hamilton in the pit lane in the first place. One mechanical failure on one McLaren rearranges the entire back half of the afternoon. There is a moment earlier in the race that makes this sting more. Hamilton comes out of that final stop ahead of Antonelli and has to give the place back under the virtual safety car, the two of them crossing the pit exit line almost together. The sequence replayed and picked over on the broadcast. He hands the position back on track. Then the stewards take a second one off him on paper. The championship after 11 rounds reads Antonelli 219, Hamilton 50 points behind him, Russell 59 back in third. Mercedes lead the constructors on 379 to Ferrari's 307. The gap between the two title contenders does not move by a single point across the Hungarian weekend, and both of them spend that weekend being processed by the stewards. Vasseur's verdict on Ferrari's afternoon is short, and it is not aimed at the FIA. Not a good result at all. Nothing to be satisfied with. Point taken for the rest of the season. Hamilton's is aimed slightly more broadly. Every opportunity he gives those stewards, he says afterwards. Every single time they give him a penalty. He also admits to a lot of mistakes on the day, which is the part that gets quoted less. 4 sanctions in 3 weekends. A false start at Silverstone, contact at Spa, blocking in qualifying at the Hungaroring, and then a 1/10 of a kilometre per hour on lap 56. None of those 4 are the same offence, and none of them are contested on the facts. What they have in common is that all 4 were produced by measurement rather than by judgment, by a system that logs a false start to the 1,000th, a lap sector to the metre, and a pit lane to the 10th, and then presents the stewards with a number that leaves almost nothing to argue about. Ollie Bearman goes into this season on 10 licence points, 2 away from a suspension, and has spent the entire year managing that number rather than racing freely. Lance Stroll sits on 6. Antonelli is now on 4 with a title to defend and half a season to survive. Hamilton carries no points at all from Hungary, and still leaves it further from the championship than he arrived. Nobody has been suspended in 2026 yet. That is worth saying plainly, because the ledger is not a countdown that anyone is currently losing. What it is instead is a second scoreboard, running alongside the one everybody watches, filling up in increments that no driver can see from inside the car, and no team can appeal on the arithmetic. There is a contract sitting underneath all of this too. Hamilton is signed to Ferrari through this season with an option on the next one, and reporting in July suggested he is close to taking it. Whether that is the story of a driver who won in Barcelona in June and is second in the championship in July, or the story of a driver who has been sanctioned 4 times in 3 weekends and finished behind his teammate in Hungary, depends almost entirely on which half of his season you choose to look at. Both halves are real, and they are 2 months apart. The summer break resets nothing that matters here. No license gets cleared, no point expires early, and not one timing loop gets recalibrated because a driver was unhappy. Both files stay open on the same shelf, and the sport comes back in August, measuring everything exactly as hard as it did in July.